What's up, guys? David DeCelle here, your host of the Business with the Boys podcast. And I am very excited to bring our guest to you today, Michael Barbarita, who actually lives in one of my favorite places, Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Michael Barbarita has owned and operated retail, manufacturing, and service companies over the last 30 years. One of the retail companies he operated is called Ski Town USA, and he grew that from 2.5 million to 8 million in less than 5 years. And his story, in terms of how he acquired that company, how he came up with the money, put it on credit cards, is a testament to his resilience and his belief in himself. And it was a risk and an investment that ultimately did pan out. And the other thing that he had done quite a bit of is one of the products that he manufactured was cookies to scoop frozen cookie dough. And that was featured on the QVC Home Shopping Network and was selected as one of the top 20 products in the state of Massachusetts back in 1997. Today, he heads up Next Step CFO, helping companies grow and understand their financials a heck of a lot more than they do now. But Michael has a lot of great insights, some step-by-step formulas, and this is an episode that you're not going to want to miss. But with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believed me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I make it look easy. Yeah, Mayweather with the defense. I don't care what a critic got to say. I got them picking up the pieces. That mean you really playing with your life. I'm about to come and run it all back. Well, Michael, I'm a little partial to you joining as a guest because I'm from Massachusetts. I have family in the Cape. I absolutely love the Cape. So welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much, David. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having
Uh,
me.
of course, of course. So, I guess to help set the stage for our listeners, give us a sense of your background, from school, through now, kind of walk us through your journey. How'd you get to where you are? And Landon and I may interject along the way to ask some clarifying questions, but bring us back to how you got your career started.
Sure. So I went to Babson College. I majored in accounting. And then, I had what I call private industry accounting jobs. I worked at one of the darlings of Wall Street at the time called Prime Computer. Was a hardware computer company, one of the first, but more for businesses. A little bit desktop kind of stuff, but it was really a long time ago. Um, and But after that, I wanted to get into business for myself. So I bought a ski retail company, a ski specialty retail store called Ski Town USA in the Boston area, and grew that company from 2.5 million to 8 million in 5 years. Really utilizing a lot of the strategies that we'll be talking about today. And then I then sold that company, worked for the company for a while as CFO, and then I started I actually bought some recipes, some cookie dough recipes from a husband and wife team in Winchester, Massachusetts, and started marketing a product called Cookies to Scoop frozen cookie dough. We grew that business. We were also picked as one of the top 20 products on QVC in the state of Massachusetts, and that was a great experience being on QVC.
I have a question. Being in that
Yeah.
business while you owned it, I assume revenue grew, but how much weight did you put on being in that business?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
You
the
got to
thing.
sample your own product, right?
That was the problem. That was the problem. It was an out of shape scenario. We'll put it that way. But then I sold that company to a frozen dessert distributor in North Grafton, and then I had a failure. I took all the principles that I learned that were successful, and I didn't do one of them. So I started. I wanted to serve the aging population, so I started an outpatient rehabilitation facility called Freedom Therapy Center. Now, in all the previous businesses I owned, I always implemented business and financial strategies that my competition wasn't doing. But for some crazy, out of mind experience reason, I implemented everything that my competition was doing. I did everything that they were doing. As a result, there was no differentiation. And so I ended up closing that business. I felt totally fell on my face and learned a lot. And then I started Next Step CFO. This was in 2007. So 30 days after I closed Freedom Therapy Center, I started Next Step CFO, um, and I've been in that business ever since. And the reason why I got into that business, number one, is one of the toughest steps to take uh, when you fall on your face is the step after the fall, the next step. And so 30 days after I closed Freedom Therapy Center, Next Step CFO was born. And the lesson that I learned was that you just can't keep doing what your competition is doing. Can't message the same way that your competition is messaging. And so that was the clear, brutal lesson that I learned in the at Freedom Therapy Center. And so ever since then, I've been doing fractional CFO services at Next Step CFO. But in the last 5 years, I started to develop more of a strategic side where we help guide business owners to implement business and financial strategies that their competition isn't doing. And so, it's funny, David and Landon, if you were going to be a CFO for a Fortune 500 company, you would, if you weren't strategic on top of understanding the financial numbers, you're not going to get the job.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, fractional CFOs get away with not being strategic. They are just numerically oriented, and that they identify the critical metrics in the business. They solve cash flow problems. They deal with they prepare business and cash flow forecasts, forward looking, all valuable stuff. Don't get me wrong, that's what we do on the fractional CFO side. But business owners want more than that. What I found is that business owners want the cure, not the prevention. And so that's what the strategic side is, because the strategic side is the actual cure. The CFO side is the prevention. Prevention. What do I mean by that? Well, like in a business and cash flow forecast, one of the great values that a business and cash flow forecast has is it shows you, if you do it professionally, how much cash you're going to need in the future, whether it's the next month, next year, and it gives you the time to go out and get that cash or acquire it, whether it's through investors or whether it's through hip pocket national bank, as I call it. Whatever methodology to get it, that's what the forecast does. It's forward looking, but it's preventative. It's, we're preventing a cash flow problem. We're preventing having a scramble. It's all preventative. Whereas the actual business strategies, some of them that I'll talk about today, those are the cure to a lack of revenue. They're a cure to being able to differentiate yourself. So that's my story. That's my journey, and that's what I've learned along the way.
I find so much truth in that. Working with business owners myself, Michael, I always say, it's been my experience being a business owner myself. I guess I like making decisions at what I call the whiteboard level as opposed to the spreadsheet level.
Yeah.
And I think all of my business owners feel the same way, right? They want to work up here, but they need somebody down here in the spreadsheet level that can kind of tell them this is why. And then, most entrepreneurs are just doers, right? You just tell me how the hell to get it done. I'll go make it happen, right? So I definitely can see why the services you're offering bring a lot of value for sure.
That's why I got into the strategic side in 2021, because that's the cure, and that's what business owners really want. I mean, they want the financial, they need them. They can't survive without, they can't make proper decisions without them, but they're bored by them.
Yep.
for the most part. Okay, it's a good cure for insomnia. But at the same by the same token, they need that information to make decisions. And we try to simplify it as much as we can. We have what we call the vital five metrics that every business owner should know about the financial aspect of their business. That they should know their sales, they should know their gross profit percent, their net profit, and their current cash balance. If they have those five numbers, they'll be ahead of 90% of the business owners out there, and they can make decisions with those five numbers.
Yeah, it's being that strategic partner, it's like a thinking partner, especially with the business owners that are too close to some of the problems to see the solutions where they chat with you or they chat with us and it's like, we're like, what? Well, why wouldn't you just do this? And they're like,
Right,
ah. I
right.
do want to go back to some points in your story that you made. So you had made mention that the first business, the retail ski shop, you bought, and it was doing about 2.5 million in revenue. And with our listeners, a lot of them already own businesses. Some of them want to be entrepreneurial and start a business, but there's another path, which is buy a business. What I'm curious to know from you is how old were you when you bought that business? Did you have enough cash to be able to secure, via the purchase price on your own? Did you bring in outside capital? Like, I want to try to help empower these folks who are thinking about buying a business to think through how to go about doing that.
That's a terrific question. Okay, so what we did, I had some partners. What we did is I had $5,000 to my name, but I needed to raise 100,000. So I borrowed. I think it was about, trying to reflect back, but I
Hmm.
borrowed like 45,000 at 25% interest.
People want to bitch about 7% today.
I know it, at 25% interest, and the remainder was on credit cards. So, I did the complete financial analysis. I did it all out. I thought for sure, I thought it was a good price overall that we had, that we bargained, that we negotiated. Um, the only leverage we had, though, is that the seller wanted to sell it 50 years old, and he was 50. He had this goal, this weird goal, and we used it as leverage against him, because there was no one else around that was ready to buy except for us. And so it was fascinating, that's how that was 100,000 down, and then we financed the inventory over a year, which was really good because we sold the inventory in about, I think it was less than 6 months. So that worked out well from a cash flow standpoint. And then the core business itself was 200 grand. But this is back in the 80s, by the way, and I bought it when I was 20, let's see, 28.
Well,
And by the
there's a
way,
lot of,
us being single, I'm still single, but being single as well at the time, of course, sometimes it's very easy to make these decisions because the only one jumping over the cliff is you.
right.
You know?
Well, it's interesting. Where you put yourself in debt, credit card,
Oh
25%,
yeah,
all
oh yeah,
that.
oh yeah.
And you kind of burn the boats and you got to make it work. And I feel like some people that will absolutely paralyze and destroy them, whereas other people, it's lights a fire under their butt to get going. The other thing, so Landon and I have a friend, Dan Allison. He was actually our first guest on the podcast. Landon was just over his house today. A little birdie told me, Landon, by the way. Um, but so with that said, Dan sold his first company for well into the eight figures,
Wow,
and he crushed. And then he was 26 when he did that.
wow,
And he then had the assumption that, well, I'm 26 years old. I just had a massive exit. Like everything that I touch, will turn to gold. And then he
right.
had a series of failures until he got his next big pop. and he's had a wonderful career, since then, and still is. So my question is, you had two successful businesses, experienced a lot of the growth. I assume some successful exits with those two
Yep, yep,
businesses,
yep.
and then you fell on your face.
Right.
So my question is, how did you mentally handle that failure so that it didn't cause you to go and get a regular job like some people would do and
Yeah.
keep pushing forward and not be discouraged?
Well, as I reflect back, it's just I needed to right a wrong. I needed to erase this horrific experience and the way I went about it versus the successful ones. Like I said, in the successful businesses I owned, I always implemented business and financial strategies that my competition wasn't doing. But for some reason, I took stupid pills, and I was doing exactly what my competition was doing, and I didn't have any free thinking. And so, but and by the way, I was waking up in the middle of the night with cold sweats, worried about cash flow and all the customers I was losing. Vendors were calling left and right looking for money. There was personal liability galore. All of that stuff. The employees were leaving. They saw a sinking ship. There was no money in the company bank account on Wednesday and a payroll due on Friday. There was, all the madness you could possibly think of. So, but I didn't think about all of that much when I wanted to go to the next thing. I thought about my goal, my dreams was still to own my own business. And not because there's a lot of time freedom necessarily, but because it's almost like like a mountain climber says, well, why do you climb that mountain? Well, it's there. Well, the opportunity to own a business is there. And so that was it. And in terms of discouraged, I was devastated, but I wasn't discouraged. Does that make sense?
It does.
Absolutely. I think
It
you're just like any entrepreneur, like the failures teach you more than sometimes the successes.
Well, totally.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and again, I'll relate to me personally. I'm very, very competitive. David knows this. Um, Winning for me is the expectation. It hurts a hell of a lot worse when I don't, right?
Right.
So
Right.
the loss leaves a worse taste in your mouth than quote unquote winning because that's what should happen. That's what should be the outcome, right? So
Right.
I
Right.
think you're just wired just like all of us sitting
Yeah.
on this call and most of our listeners.
Right. Right. I think you're right. I mean,
And let's
that's
face
exactly
it, owners don't make good employees. So once you've been in that role,
right.
it's tough to do anything else.
That's the other thing. I'm not, I think we business owners and entrepreneurs, I don't want to say price ourselves out of the market, but we're not very marketable. You know, I don't think anyway, or I didn't think so for me, speaking for myself.
You're not wrong.
So I want to go down the path of one thing that we talked about on our intro call around the 80/20 rule, and most folks, have heard of that in some way, shape, or form. However, excuse me, in this particular case, we talked about strategies for identifying and prioritizing what those core business activities are using
Right.
the 80/20 rule. So that's all I'm going to say. I want you to take that and
Okay.
just help educate us.
Yeah. So when I wrote co-authored my book called Powerful Business Strategies, which I give away, by the way, it's on my website. You could download it. It's free. And when I was doing research for the book, I looked at this 80/20 rule concept, and no one's ever wrong about 80/20 rule, by the way. I want to make that clear. And but when I interviewed business owners, they were saying, well, that's easy. I asked the question, how do you think the 80/20 rule applies to business? And they'd say, oh, that's easy. 80% of my revenue comes from 20% of my customers. Okay. And I wrote that down. But what I did, I went a little deeper than that. And I said, What if 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of what you do every day? And in thinking about that, I identified 7 areas that I believe represent the 20% of what you need to do every day that drives 80% of the revenue. And if you do this, you're leveraging your time very effectively because by doing these 7 things, you're driving 80% of the business. And the first one, I mean, and by the way, these are going to sound obvious because as I was thinking through that, what's the basics? What are the things that business owners really should be focused on that's going to drive and make a significant impact? And so the first one is leads, but not just any lead, of course, good quality leads. That's the first step in the 7-step. We call it, by the way, I call it the 7-step pathway to profit formula. So the first step is leads. Second, now that you've got good leads, the right lead, the perfect lead, if you will, then you work on conversions. What does conversions mean? Conversions, I don't mean closing. That's the next step. Conversions is getting people into your sales process, whatever that is. I mean, for a retailer, it's the customer that walks through the door. For somebody who's in the coaching or a professional capacity, it might be a meeting or some type of proposal. And so now that you have the perfect lead, you're converting more of them into your sales process. The third step is closing. You have to understand what your closing rates are, and you have to perfect your closing. So you got the perfect lead, you got more conversions into your sales process, you're closing more business. The fourth one is highly ignored, in my opinion, from my research, and that is client retention. We business owners think that many times, or feel psychologically, that once we get a customer, we get to keep them by default. Well, that does not happen. So focusing on client retention is a really important area to keep driving the revenue. So now you have the perfect lead, you've converted more into your sales process, you're closing more customers, you're keeping more customers. Now you have to increase the average dollar per sale. And by the way, there's strategies surrounding all of this that we use, but this is our baseline. So, but increasing the average dollar per sale. So if you're selling to 10 customers and the average ticket's $100, your job now is to make it 110, 120, and increase that average dollar per sale. And then is frequency of sale. That's the 6th step. How often can you sell to that customer? So if you're selling to that customer 2 times, why not sell it 2.5 times a year, 3 times a year, and work on that? And what we found, by the way, is once somebody buys something from you, there's a 34% chance that they'll buy something else if presented. What we found in our research is that people don't present the other products or services that they offer at the point of sale. When somebody buys something, they're hot to try. That's the perfect time to present something else. And 34% of the time, you're going to be successful. But many business owners pass up on that opportunity. So the first 6 areas are leads, getting that quality lead, converting, having more conversions, increasing your closing rate, keeping more customers, increasing their average dollar per sale, increasing the frequency that they buy. And then finally, we do have to control our costs, both variable costs and fixed costs. So those are the 7 steps that we believe drive 80% of the revenue and profit.
So when you're thinking about a business, right? And let's say I'm the business owner.
Yep.
Are you saying that that's what I need to be focusing on the majority of the time, those 7 steps? Or is it split up amongst my team members, assuming that it's not just me? Like, how do you think through the dynamics amongst the team and where they're all spending time? Because there's also examples, like I think of a financial advisor. I work with a lot of financial advisors and financial planning firms, and we have them go through what we call an energy audit. So there's 4 quadrants: things that you love to do and you're great at, like to do and you're good at, don't like to do but you're still good at, and then don't like to do and you're bad at. And oftentimes, when these folks are feeling down or bogged down and they're not growing, it's because they're spending too much time in those bottom two quadrants of things they don't like to do. And what we try to do is delegate, automate, or delete those things to get them to the top two quadrants, likely in alignment with the 80-20 rule. But then there's other people on the team that's being delegated to because those things still need to ultimately get done. So when
Right.
you're walking through these 7 steps, you're thinking about the 80-20 rule in this context. How does that fit into a business with multiple people with different roles?
Excellent question. So, first of all, this is the 20% of what you do every day. So, the other 80%, you might be fighting fires or doing a variety of other things. But I love, if they have a team, I love delegating this stuff to a team. There's no question about it. But once again, if the business owner prefers, they can work on this 20% and they can delegate the other 80. Or if they think their strong suit is the other 80, they can work on this 20.
I like
So
that. I
yeah,
get
so
that.
that's the way we work it. We work it with the people who have teams.
And I think most of us as the owners and quote unquote captains of the ship, you know, it's kind of our job to be the visionaries, right?
Right.
So I think if you spend your time at that level, then it's easier to delegate what pieces each member of the team needs to own. But I think, realistically, if you just focused on those 7 areas, you're going to be a hell of a lot more successful than, like you said, 95% of the businesses out there.
Right. And the thing about it is that you got the skill set of the entrepreneur has to be, if somebody's good at leads, then that's the person that we need to work. It needs to work on the leads. So they have to fit the right skill set with the category.
But again, the business owner needs to be the one that identifies that maybe I'm not the best one with leads. Joe on my team is
There you
great with
go.
leads,
There you
but
go.
he's still living up here, right?
Right. Right.
And
Right.
and
Right. Right.
funneling that down. And because I think about my business personally, right? And
Yeah.
all of them, the vast majority of my time seems to be putting out fires and be reactionary, where if you spend the time and you're diligent about putting in the time up front just to focus on 1 or 2 things every single day, things generally seem to go pretty well.
Right. Agreed. Agreed 100%.
Let's
So
go
yeah.
ahead.
So that's our base. That's the base we start with, but we have strategies that represent every one of those, and we would never have enough time to go through those all today. But I'd like to go through a couple of them if you don't mind,
Yeah, please.
especially
Absolutely.
at the front end, the leads, the conversions, and the closing rates. I'd like to cover at least one, if not two, strategies that we have associated with that. So when we were doing research of the book for the book, we had the only thing that resonated with us is we had to go back to 1931 of all years. And we found that the key to successful marketing, and this is when it was first mentioned, the key to successful marketing is you have to get into the mind of the prospect. Okay, that sounds great, but how do you go about doing that? Well, what we found is that getting into the mind of the prospect is centered around two emotional issues: the problem the customer has and doesn't want, the solution they want, they can't find. So if you focus on those two emotional issues, you will start to penetrate the mind of the prospect. Now, what we did is we created a formula called the conversion formula. It's a 4-step process. It needs to be done in the right order, otherwise it doesn't work. And it needs to be followed. If I told you I'm going to give you 1 part hydrogen and 1 part oxygen, I want you to create water, I don't think that'll work, because you need 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen. So it's the same thing with this formula. And the 4 parts, I'll go through the steps. The four steps of what we call the conversion formula is: step 1 is what we call captivate. This is where you must identify the problem that the customer has and doesn't want. Now, let me explain something. It can't be as simple as this, because I'll give you this example. So, like when I was speaking to a painter, they said, "Oh, I know what the problem is. They don't know what color paint. The customer doesn't know what color paint to use." I said, "Well, every painter can figure out what color paint to use. So that's really not the problem. It might be a problem, but it's not a problem that can differentiate you in the marketplace. What are the problems that the industry has and that the perception of the customer has when it comes to your industry? Start there." And so if you started there, like for example, painters never show up on time. They never come. They say they're going to be there on Wednesday. They don't show up. They say then once they get there, they make a mess. They miss the corners. They get paint over on the trim. All of that.
You're adding salt to the wound. I've had a lot of work done to my house, and
He's been
contractors are
doing some
not reliable.
painting. He's been doing some painting himself, if that tells you his experience with
Yeah, that
contractors as
does.
of late.
I know. I think I hit a sore spot. So, so that's the best way to identify the real problem that the customer has. You have to dig deep. But the best way to identify that real problem is to first take it from an industry perspective and what the customer's perception is. And then that's the problem, and then work on solving that problem in a unique manner. Or even if it's not a unique manner, lots of times we business owners can take the simplest of things, the simplest of problems, and we say, everybody else does that already, but they don't tell anybody. And so, you can't just say, everybody does that, because the thing is that no one else is communicating it. They might do it. They might be able to do it, but they're not communicating it. So, and we do a lot of testing to identify, we help the business owner do a lot of testing to identify the problem that the customers have in the marketplace. We use social media and so forth. But the second step is called fascinate. This is the solution. This is your unique solution to the problem that the customer can't find. So captivate is the problem. Fascinate is the solution. And then the third step, and by the way, these first two steps of the conversion formula, I think you'll hear often that people buy based on emotion and then back up that emotion logically. Well, the first two steps of the conversion formula are that emotional component. The third step is called educate. This is the logical component. With the educate, you go into more detail on how that solution is superior to the competition. And so if a husband or a spouse was going to tell the other spouse why they bought a certain product, it's usually from the educate, because that's the logical component. And then finally, the offer, which has to be so compelling and so irresistible that you cannot turn it down. So, and I will go over the 5 components of a compelling offer. But first, it's captivate, fascinate, educate, and close. And by the way, the captivate is the headline, because remember, I said this has to be done in the right order. So the captivate is the headline, the fascinate is the subheadline, and then the educate is because when you captivate and fascinate, now you get their attention. Mm-hmm. So now you have a little more time to educate them, and then you hit them with the offer. And so it has to follow that flow. And so I don't, many times people say it has to be an offer that's so compelling that the customer, the prospect can't turn it down. And then they don't go about explaining what a compelling offer is. Well, let me do that. Okay. So
please,
in our opinion, there's 5 components to a compelling offer. One is urgency and scarcity. That's one. Urgency. This offer ends on Friday. Scarcity. There's only 3 left. And the same thing with people who do scheduling. Look, I don't have the bandwidth to do 10 interviews or 10 proposals. I only have the bandwidth to do 5. So the first 5, are going to have that opportunity. So that's scarcity and urgency. The second is risk reversal, where the seller in the transaction takes most or all the risk. One of the best risk reversals I've ever done, and was the impetus. Oh, I shouldn't say the impetus, but it was part of the reason why we grew from 2.5 million to 8 million in 5 years in the ski business, was because we implemented what we called a ski guarantee. So the problem the customer had in the ski industry is they really didn't know if the ski they were being sold was the right ski for them until they got up in the mountain and tried it out. So we implemented what we call the ski guarantee. Ski the ski 3 times, you don't like it, bring it back for a brand new pair and keep bringing it back until you get it, until we get it right. Now, when I first introduced this to my managers and employees, they thought I was really crazy because, as you probably know, a ski depreciates dramatically once it's skied on. But my belief was that the customer, all they wanted was a great, and still today, was a great ski experience. They didn't care how they got it. They didn't want their boots to fall up, hurt while they were skiing. They didn't want their bindings to come out. They wanted the ski to ski at their performance level or a little greater. That's all they wanted. And they wanted the beautiful weather, the beautiful day, the scenery. They wanted it all. That's all they wanted, though. And it proved to be true because we sold 8,000 pair of skis the first year we implemented it, a 25% increase from the previous year, and only 8 came back. Next year, we sold 11,000 pair, and only 14 came back. My managers and employees thought I was crazy because they envisioned thousands of pair of skis coming back from the field and them having to do all this extra work and us losing a bunch of money. And that just didn't happen. A risk reversal where the seller in the transaction takes most or all the risk is a great strategy. But notice I identified the problem that the customer had, right? The problem the customer had is they didn't know if the ski they were being sold by some hotshot ski salesperson was the right ski for them until they got up in the mountain. Third, so you have urgency and scarcity, risk reversal, and third thing is adding more value to your product or service. So when I was in the frozen cookie dough business, the problem the customer had was they didn't want to waste valuable oven space baking cookies. So what we did, and we understood the long-term value of a customer, which is, by the way, very important for people to understand the long-term value of a customer. Our average opening order was $50. And what we did is we gave away a free convection oven to solve that problem, that they didn't want to use their valuable oven space to bake cookies. That cost us $200. And it worked famously. Why? It solved the problem that they had. They were able to put other things in it as well, by the way. And we believed in our product because the value of a customer to us was $5,000. So we knew once they started buying that we would continue to get the frequency of sale, as I talked about earlier, would increase their average dollar per sale.
You also eliminated a little risk for them because you gave them additional oven space. There's no more risk for them to lose profits for using other ovens.
Absolutely. And so it worked extremely well, and it helped build that business. So that's adding more value. We added more value to our product by offering that convection oven.
Before you get to the next point, I want to interject because
please.
You brought up a very, very important point, which is with the long-term value of the client. So from the outside looking in, one would say, why would you ever eat $200 for a $50 product?
Right.
But you know that they're worth $5,000 over X period of time. So it makes all the sense in the world to do that. And I just want to emphasize the importance of knowing that. So like going back to advisors again, because that's an industry I know very well. Typically the average client is worth $10,000 or more per year.
Wow.
So you could go and if you want to buy leads, you could spend $500 to $1,000 a lead and convert them to where the cost of acquisition for that customer is $10,000. Sweet, because the average tenure of a client advisor relationship is 20 plus years. So you don't make any money the first year, but you're making money every year moving forward. So understanding that lifetime value of the customer or client is critical to be able to make decisions on how you go and acquire those folks.
Absolutely. And that's why I mentioned that too, because if I didn't mention the long-term value of a customer, people would be thinking I'm a nut because, a $50 sale, a $200 investment, yeah, but understanding that is critical. It turns an illogical look into a very logical approach. So the fourth area was packaging. The fourth component of a compelling offer is packaging and bundling products and services together. And I'm going to go back to the ski business. So everybody and his brother packaged skis, bindings, and poles. That's just like absolute automatic if you're a ski business. Still, I believe that's still the case today, even though I'm 40 years removed from it. But what we did is we took the most popular ski graphic hardware, the ski graphics, the most popular ski graphics, and we went to the clothing department and we packaged up a hat, Parker pant, and sweater matching the most popular ski graphics. And we sold those like crazy. And they were packages. That's all they were. And it helped add on sales because it was 4 components right out of the chute. And it really worked well. So when you there's a perception of value when you package things together. And so packaging and bundling is the fourth component of compelling offer. And by the way, you can utilize all 5 of these components, as I'll get to the 5th one in a moment, all at once. Or you could do just a risk reversal and adding more value. Or you could do a risk reversal and scarcity and urgency. So you can mix and match. It's better to do more, the more the merrier.
Well, and with the packaging, let me ask a clarifying question. So, someone buys skis, are you throwing in a hat, or someone buys skis, they get a hat at a discount? Like, how is that positioned from a packaging standpoint?
Yeah. Okay. So, if with respect to how we did it, so once they bought their skis, we directed them to the clothing department to show them, as we displayed, the matching package. Now they could buy a la carte, but they'd pay more.
Okay, so that's helpful, because what I'm getting at is when someone's spending, let's say, $1,000 on skis,
Yeah.
and then you're proposing, I'm making this up because I don't know your price points for them, but hey, for another $100, you're gonna look fly out on the mountain because you're gonna match. That's a lot different than someone coming in for hats and gloves and trying to say, hey, let's go look at some skis, because you're jacking up their price journey. So I think there's something there too with packaging lower price products where it's like, oh yeah, throw it in.
Absolutely. We used to package gloves with goggles, like it's for the fat low end person, or that person just looking for those. So, without a doubt, we happen to deal, unfortunately, in the ski business, we deal with a lot of high price point scenarios. So anyway, yeah. So the fifth component of a compelling offer is the toughest. It's being disconnected to the outcome, being indifferent. Now, let me give you a quick example. There's a number of examples, but let me give you a quick example. So if I'm working with somebody, I would say something like, well, whether you work with me or someone else, there's 5 steps that you must take in order to properly implement business strategy. And I go through those 5 steps. Of course, those 5 steps are compelling. You're going to make them compelling, right? And that, I'm the one who introduced the 5 steps. Why would they work with someone else? But at the same token, I said, whether you work with me or someone else. Now, the other people say, well, don't let me get in the way of you being successful at ABC. Let me refer somebody to you. Or you say at the very beginning, I just want to make sure that you understand that if for any reason you don't like me or I'm in the way, I'll be happy to refer you to somebody else. And then you go through your process. So that indifference, and then there's other ways that you talk about indifference through the whole process. The more indifferent you are, the less you sound like a used car salesman that cares about yourself and not the prospect.
That's important. Landon and I grew up in the life insurance space, and the saying that, resonates with us because at the beginning of our careers, we most certainly went about sales the wrong way, is uh, we had commission breath and everyone could smell it and it stunk. And
Yeah,
so
that's
it's
a good way.
helpful with those one-liners and phrases to implement into the sales process so that you can actually be detached from the outcome. But yeah, Landon, that's stuff that we struggled with in the first, couple, 2, 3 years of our career, is just slinging, and then actually being like upset when someone would say no because we were in fact attached to the outcome.
Right. That's
It's
exactly right.
funny because that was literally the exact scenario that I was thinking of and like how different my world is now. It's like, and I think the difference now is like, do I want to help everybody? Yeah, but I also realize I'm not a fit for everybody and I don't care, right? Like I'm going to give you my best foot and my thoughts on it, take it or leave it, right? Like that's
That's
the reality of
great.
it. We're a little fortunate now to be in the positions that we're in. But it's very different than the early days. And it's like, sweet, okay, it doesn't work out. That's on to the next one, you
Right.
know.
And that's just a wonderful way to go about it because when you're attached, no matter how disattached you think you are, the customer can pick it up.
Well, I always tell my team, one of the things that I want to do is I want to eliminate competition through authenticity, right? If somebody doesn't like doing business with us, why the hell would we try and force them to do business with us? If they don't like
Right.
us as a person and what we're about, it's never going to be a great fit long term, anyways, right?
I
I want to
agree.
work with people that I truly care about. And it's the same in my business. If somebody comes in and, you know, they may be a great opportunity, but I don't like them at the human level. I'm just going to hit the next button and just say, we're probably not a fit. And that's okay.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, that's the fifth. So it's scarcity and urgency, risk reversal, adding more value to your product or service, packaging and bundling, and then finally being indifferent to the outcome.
Have you come across Alex Hermosi, Michael?
God, that sounds familiar.
He's
He's the
great.
he's this yoked influencer who basically built a company called Gym Launch, sold it for like $70 million or something like that, and now he has a company called acquisition.com. But my point of bringing him up is your methodology, and you'd enjoy his book too. Your methodology and this book that I'll mention are very much aligned. I think you'd really
Wow.
enjoy it. It's called
Wow. Yeah, what's it called?
$100 million offers.
Okay, cool.
I think you'd really enjoy it, and it will. There, I can't remember the nuances off the top of my head because it's been a while since I read it. But not only is it very much aligned, but there may be some things in there that color between the fine lines if there's any space,
Sure.
available, so
Sure.
to speak. So
Absolutely.
definitely check it out.
Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you for
And
that.
and on that, speaking of books, one of the things that we ask all of our guests is a book that's had an impact on them. And the book that you chose, which, to be honest, is one of my favorite books that I read when I was in between being a financial advisor and getting into consulting, that has resonated with me, is The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. Talk to
Right.
us about the impact that that's had on you.
Well, I think it's had a tremendous impact because understanding the compound effect of little small incremental changes is incredible. And reverting it back to my 7-step pathway to profit formula, if you have small incremental changes in each of those 7 areas, the compound effect is incredible. If you have a little 3% increase in leads, 3% increase in conversions, 3% increase in closing rate, 3% right down the line, that compound effect is magnificent. And that's where I learned that. And I applied it with the 7-step pathway to profit formula.
Yeah, it's oftentimes people think of each of those in silos, and it's like, oh, it's a lot of work for that 3% or that 2% or that 10%. But when you add it across all the key functions of the business, it's how you go from 2.5 to $8 million with the ski example,
Right.
you
That's right.
know?
Exactly.
Love it. Well, Michael, this has been an absolute pleasure. I don't come across a lot of people these days with a Massachusetts accent, so thanks for making me feel like I'm at home. I appreciate the
Uh-oh.
no R's being used and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. We're
oh
worse
man.
than Southerners at times, I think. In terms of the most made fun of accent is probably the Boston accent.
The best is when there's these movies based in Boston and the actors aren't from Boston and they, I think, over exaggerate the
Right.
accent. But
Right.
um,
Right.
but with that said, if I'm listening to this show, I want to get a copy of your book. I want to explore what it looks like to work with you. I want to learn more and connect. Where should I go?
Yeah, go to nextstepcfo.net. That's nextstepcfo.net. And also for three lucky people, I can show any small business owner how to increase revenue by $100,000 without spending any additional money on marketing or ads. And for three people who go to my website, nextstepcfo.net/contact, fill out the contact form and put pathway to profit in the message section. The first three people, be happy to do that for them. Show them how to get $100,000 of additional revenue without spending any additional money on marketing or ads.
Look at that little risk reversal. Don't have to outlay any cash to get some insights. Practicing
Can't
what you
afford not to
preach.
do it, folks.
Appreciate it. Well, Michael,
Okay.
it's a pleasure. Great to meet you. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Likewise.
Landon,
Thank you.
nice to see you as always. And for everyone tuning in, appreciate your time and attention. And we will catch you on the next episode.
Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believed me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I make it look easy. Yeah, Mayweather with the defense. I don't care what a critic got to say. I got them picking up the pieces. That to me, you really playing with your life.